Hi class, today we're going to be looking at muscles of the arm. So what we're going to do is start with the anterior arm. So imagine anatomical position, a person standing facing you, arms down at their sides, palms facing forward. So the anterior side of the arm is palm facing forward. So we're going to start with the anterior arm and identify the different muscles that we can see in this view. So I'm going to start with the shoulder blade area, which on the anterior side of the shoulder blade, the muscle that we're looking at is named after the surface that it's on. It's called the subscapularis. So on our model, this whole area here is our subscapularis muscle, named again after that area of bone. So subscapularis, right there. Next, we're going to move into the upper arm, and really the main muscle that we want to focus on, the anterior side, is called the biceps brachii. So right here, biceps brachii, biceps brachii. So it's really important that with that we include brachii in the name. A lot of us are used to just calling that muscle our biceps muscle, but we do have a biceps femoris. So as we had discussed before, one of the things that we do when we're naming muscles is we name sometimes after attachment points or location. And so here biceps means that there are two attachments for the origin, and brachii is a location. We also have a muscle called the biceps femoris, which you can probably guess from the name is instead located in the femoral region or leg. So real important again that we add that brachii in when we're naming it and we don't just call it the biceps. So again, biceps brachii, this big muscle on the anterior side of the arm or upper arm. Moving down into the forearm. What I like to do is kind of pick a starting point. And I normally start on the lateral or thumb side of the arm. And I work my way around toward the pinky side. And then what we can do is start to turn the arm, go on to the posterior arm, and work our way back to the thumb. However you choose to do it, if there's one muscle that you can find that stands out to you, that's easy for you to remember, then sometimes it's helpful to always start there, know that muscle, and kind of memorize the others in order of occurrence as you move around the arm. And that always gives you a starting point in case you're just confused on an exam. Wait, what muscle is that? If I can go back to my starting point and I know the order in which the muscles occur, it kind of helps me to figure out where I'm at. So like I said, I like to start on the lateral or thumb side of the anterior arm. And I like to start here with this big muscle called the brachioradialis. So it was named this because radialis, it's on the radial or thumb side of the forearm. And it goes all the way up into the upper arm, which we know is the brachial region. So again, named brachioradialis, being that it attaches both to the upper arm and the radial side of our forearm. One of the really helpful things to do with these arm muscles is to follow their tendons. And we can follow their tendons to either the lateral or medial side, or maybe to fingers, maybe to toes. And that helps us kind of think about the name that might be possible. So here again, when I'm looking at brachioradialis, I can see that tendon definitely on the thumb side of the forearm. And that kind of helps me think about that being the radial side of the forearm. Moving on from here, sticking with more superficial muscles that I can see easily from without removing anything. we're going to kind of move into the crevice of the elbow area. And this muscle right here that runs on a little angle, this is called our pronator teres. Pronator teres. So we did learn that pronation is taking our palm and rotating it towards the back of the room or down, so that if we were holding soup in our hand, for instance, we would drop the soup when we pronate it. So you can think about this muscle, see how it attaches over to the radial side of the arm, and picture it pulling that radius over towards the pinky, and that allows us to flip our arm. Pronator teres, right there. Next up, again, like I had said, if you follow tendons, sometimes that's helpful. So for this next muscle, I'm going to follow the tendon, and I can follow it to, again, the wrist. It stops at the wrist, and it's more so the thumb side of the wrist. So I'm thinking lateral side or thumb side, that's the radial side of the arm, and the wrist is always known as the carpal area. Now on this side of my arm, if I think about what these muscles do, they help me kind of curl my fingers in or bend my wrist towards my forearm. And when I do that action of bending my wrist, that's called wrist flexion. Remember, to flex is to decrease the angle. So this muscle is going to flex my wrist, and it attaches at the radial side of the wrist. So we're going to call this flexor carpi for wrist, flexor carpi radialis. So again, this muscle right here, flexor carpi radialis. So again, flexing my wrist because it attaches to my wrist, and it attaches at the radial side. So flexor carpi radialis. If we now move over one and we look at this muscle, this tendon I can follow directly into the palm of the hand. So when I'm looking at my options, palmaris longus seems to make sense, palmaris longus, as the tendon goes right into the palm of the hand. Then if I move over just one more, and you can see just a very little bit of it because it really is on the far medial edge of the arm. So we're seeing just a little bit of it here. Now we've got a muscle that goes and attaches instead to the pinky side of the wrist. And when we think about what bone is on that medial side or pinky side of the wrist, that's our ulna. So here now, we've got our last flexor muscle, and instead we're going to call this the flexor carpi, because again it's attaching to the wrist and flexing the wrist. Flexor carpi ulnaris. Flexor carpi ulnaris. So that's one name that I have to actually add into your list here, flexor carpi ulnaris. So we can add that in right over here, flexor carpi. Let's make it so you can see it, flexor carpi ulnaris. There we go. All right. So again, really, if you can take some time and think about where these tendons are attaching, it really does kind of help as we try to figure out the names of the muscles that we're working with. If you're in 177, that's where we can stop for anterior side of the arm. If instead you are in NatSci 201, we're going to take a look at this muscle here. So I'm going to see if I can change the color of the text here. So this muscle is going to be specific to my 201 people. Flexor digitorum superficialis. Now to actually get to this muscle, we have to go a layer deeper. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this model, rotate down. And what you can notice is, without even taking anything off, but looking sort of at a deeper level here, there is a muscle under here. I can see it running under all the tendons. It's underneath here. So right in this area. And again, we're still on the anterior side, so we're on the flexor side of the arm. This is my flexor digitorum superficialis. Flexor digitorum superficialis. So again, peeking out, it's on the next layer. So it's a little bit deeper than the muscles we've just previously identified. So we can see it peeking out from underneath the tendons right there. Again, specific to my 201 people, one layer deeper yet, we've got something called the flexor pallicus longus. Flexor pallicus longus, and I can see that peeking out right here. And so if you remember, pallex is actually the thumb. So this little muscle here, right there, is going to be flexing my thumb. So let's take a step back now and take a minute to go ahead and try to label these muscles. So what I'm going to do is just use my pen and use some numbers to go through and try to label the muscles. So we're going to start with number 1 being our subscapularis. Number 1. Subscapularis. Next up, number 2. Number 2, what do you guys think it is? Biceps brachii. Biceps brachii. Number 3 in my picture. Remember, this is the guy I like to kind of start with as a point of origin when I'm working through the arm. This is my brachioradialis. Brachioradialis. Number 4, kind of peeking out, smaller muscle, kind of peeking out from that crevice of the elbow. That's my pronator teres. Pronator teres. Number 5, going to the thumb side of my wrist. Thumb side of my wrist, flexor carpi radialis. Flexor carpi radialis. So again, remember the anterior side is going to flex my wrist or flex my fingers. So that's why we're using flexor in some of the names here. Moving on from there. Number 6, if I follow that tendon going right into the palm of my hand, that's my palmaris longus. Palmaris longus. Then on the very edge, almost hard to see the muscle, on the very edge of the arm there, we've got, sorry for that squiggly line, we've got number 7, that's going to be our flexor carpi ulnaris. If you're in NatSci 201, then remember there were the 2 deeper muscles that we also wanted to identify, the flexor digitorum superficialis, which is going to help us flex our fingers. And so again, that muscle can be seen right here. 1 layer deeper than the ones we've previously identified, kind of poking out from in between the tendons. It's a pretty big muscle, so you can see it running all underneath the tendons of these more superficial muscles. And then 1 layer deeper yet, we've got our flexor pallicus longus, which again is flexing our thumb, or pallex. And so that muscle is our deepest muscle on this side. We just see a very little bit of it poking out right here from the deepest layer, flexor pollicis longus. All right, class, so let's just take a closer look at that forearm. Moving in a little closer, we can see the muscles a little bit better and their tendons and how they attach. So like I mentioned, we're going to start with a muscle that is easy for us to recognize. For me, I like starting with my brachioradialis. So again, brachio reminding us of the upper arm, radialis reminding us that we're on that thumb side or radial side of our forearm. So here's that muscle, brachioradialis, moving into the upper arm. And again, if we follow the tendon, seeing that it does go to that thumb side or lateral side of our forearm, brachioradialis. Then moving over from here, I said kind of moving almost into the crevice of your elbow, we've got what's called the pronator teres. And so this muscle right here, if you picture it, again, attaching to your radius, and when it contracts, pulling this way and flipping your arm over. So if you were holding soup in the palm of that hand, you'd be dropping the soup as your hand flips over. Pronator teres. Then from there, again, being that we're on the flexor side of the arm, we're going to be flexing our wrist or potentially our fingers. This next muscle is going to flex the wrist, so flexor, carpi, and radialis is telling us that it attaches to, again, that thumb side or radial side of the wrist. So right here, this muscle, if we look, follow its tendon, certainly does go to the thumb side and stops at the wrist. So flexor, carpi, radialis. Next up, our palmaris longus. This reminding us that if we follow the tendon, it's going to go right into the palm of our hand. So if we look here at this muscle, and we follow its tendon directly into the palm of the hand. That helps remind us of that one. Now in this particular view, I can't quite see that far edge or medial edge of the arm, so I'm not going to be able to see my flexor carpi ulnaris unless I rotate my arm a little bit more. So we're going to skip that muscle for now. And again, if you're in 201, there are two additional muscles that we want to learn. They're the deeper underlying muscles, the flexor digitorum superficialis. So again, flexing our fingers or digits. And that was our next layer under. Here we can see that muscle peeking out from underneath the tendons of our other more superficial muscles. Here you can also see it kind of peeking out from in between those tendons. And then the deepest muscle, our flexor pollicis longus, helping us flex our pollex or thumb. And that's on our deepest level yet. So right there we see just a very little bit of it peeking out. If we could strip all the other muscles off the top, we'd see pretty clearly how it attaches and helps flex the thumb.